What happens when the people who told you to figure it out yourself suddenly need you for everything? What happens when the child who basically raised themselves become responsible and the caregivers of parents who were emotionally checked out, absent, and low effort? And the hardest part is the guilt, because Gen Xers have been expected to carry it all. They're expected to care for parents that didn't care for them. Today in this video, I am going to talk about the guilt and the struggles of the Gen Xers who are basically guilted and forced into caring for their aging parents, even though those parents didn't care for us. If you're a Gen Xer, chances are you grew up independent long before you were emotionally ready to be. We were basically latchkey kids. We came home to empty houses, we cooked our own meals, we didn't ask for help, we took care of ourselves basically. We learned to not need very much. And now, and many of us are already or in the future will be caring for parents who didn't care for us. They weren't there emotionally, physically, mentally, and that is a very complicated feeling. Because this isn't just caregiving. This is caregiving layered with grief, resentment, emotional neglect, obligation, and guilt. And for those of us that have been raised with very low effort parents, it's an even more confusing position to be in because we didn't receive that care, that love, that protection that we needed. And for this person to now expect that from us, it is a very confusing time. I have shared a video, a couple videos talking about my family and the situation with my low effort family. I'll share one of my videos here about how I deal with my low effort family and the complicated relationship that we have. But coming to this point where parents are aging and you've been in a situation like this your entire life, it's very hard. You're very conflicted. There's a lot of guilt, but there's also a lot of, internal torment. Let's get to this video. A lot of us Gen X kids didn't grow up with emotionally available parents. There was no support. There was no, how are you doing? No emotional connection. We were provided with basically food, shelter, maybe some discipline, and that's about it. There was no gentle parenting when we were growing up. We were basically told, don't cry, figure it out, stop asking questions, don't bother coming home until the lights are out on the street. And my favorite, because I said so. We learned survival and independence, and many of us don't even know what emotional safety feels like. So now decades later, when those parents need our help, there is so much struggle happening because we are asked to give the care that we never received. And here's the part that no one wants to admit out loud, that there's a lot of Gen Xers who just do not have warm feelings towards their parents. It's just a feeling of duty, of responsibility, of pressure. And then comes the guilt, because society has told you that you only have one mother, you only have one father, they did the best that they could, you're going to regret it someday. But yes, maybe they did the best they can. But I think so many Gen Xers are carrying around so much pain from trauma, from their childhood and from their earlier years, that it's just too hard and too painful to want to accept that role. And in my case, I've shared that I have a low effort family. I have one sibling. My father is not in the picture and he passed away. But my sister has always been the favorite child, the golden child. And there's been a lot of issues in the relationship of triangulation. And I have flat out refused to be the caregiver. And I have told my mother this for probably the last 20 years, that I am not going to be responsible for caring for her. Because I have been caring for her for the most part of the last 35 years. Because she's alone, she's very self-sufficient, but I have been at her beck and call basically for the last 35 years, while my golden child sister hasn't had any responsibilities whatsoever. So I, for the last 20 years, have planted the seed that I will not be the caregiver. So that prepared my mother that she needs to save money. So when it comes to the point where she's at where she can't live alone, that is not my responsibility, because I have had so much pain over the years that, yes, I have sort of forgiven, but it's very hard to forget. And if there are other family members, it's really important for those people to also step up, because it's not one person's responsibility. It should never be one person's responsibility when there's multiple people in the family. You are allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to say, I'm exhausted. You're allowed to ask siblings for help. You're allowed to reject the job of being the caregiver. You're allowed to say that it's too much. You're allowed to protect your mental health, and you're allowed to say no to the emotional manipulation. And it may seem cold and heartless, but everyone's situation is different. You do not know what someone has experienced in their life, what their childhood was like, what their parenting, the parents were like, how they were treated. So you're not allowed to place judgment on someone because they've made a decision that's different than yours. And not all of us have the capability nor the desire to care for our aging parents. I think a lot of Gen Xers are grieving two things. They're grieving the aging parents, and they're grieving the childhood that they never got to have. And that is a lot to carry. Sometimes caregiving opens old wounds. You're sitting in a doctor's office at an appointment with a parent that never gave you the time of day. You rearrange your life for parents that didn't care about what your struggles were growing up. And underneath that guilt, sometimes there's anger. And that's not about being cruel. It's about not having the care and the emotional connection or the emotional support that you needed when you were a child. And your inner child is saying, where was that care when I needed it? So I think a lot of Gen Xers are struggling because this is the position that we're now getting to now that we're in midlife. And it's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries. And it's okay to not feel guilty about the choices that you make. So if this resonates with you, let me know that you're here in the comments. And if you are currently a caregiver or approaching that part of your life, and this has brought up old wounds, let me know that you're here. I see you. I completely sympathize with you because I'm in that same situation. And for me, refusing to be that person, I'm not at that point yet because my mother is still able and she's 76. But I do think about that in the next, 5 to 10 years when this situation does come, right in my face. What will I do? And I want to hold strong on my ground that I refuse. I'm not taking this position. But what if there's no one else? And that's what I think about. And I don't want to think about that because there are so many wounds there that I don't know if I can forget about them. And that sounds petty and childish, but that's just how it is, I think, for many of us. Thank you so much to any of you that made it to the very end. I appreciate you so much. If you're a Gen Xer in midlife experiencing these same situations, I hope that you'll subscribe. Let me know you're here in the comments. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my videos. And until next time, bye for now.